Greetings, Guardians, my name is Bife here. So I wanted to go and give a little commentary on the new season on day 1 and give my first impressions after 24 hours of having experienced the season, particularly when it comes to the narrative. No commentary on the gameplay, the state of Solo 3.0, what's going on with the season, the amount of content we got, the breadth of it all that stuff. Kind of not included in this. This is purely about the story as per usual. I think it's fair to say that these videos have become fairly routine on the channel, especially since the Season of the Hunt. It's become incredibly clear that the narrative has only been getting better and better, and I've been every season offering critique in one way or another, at the beginning or the end of the season, and I think people have really started to notice how good the narrative is starting to become. And in particular, that started to get noticed around about the Season of the Chosen, and it's only really amped up ever since then. It has now gotten to the point that these videos where I give my first impressions and my critique of the narrative on day 1 are starting to become just a little bit obsolete. Now here's the thing, I'll absolutely still do my first impressions, but the main point of these videos from the outset was for them to be a first guidepost to critique for the developers. This would then combine with the videos that we do at the end of the season so that we'd be able to sit there and say, hey, this is what I thought at the beginning, this is what we think at the end, this is a bunch of critique that you guys can use to feed into future seasons. I think the thing is that the narrative at the moment is really good. I don't think I see it needing much more changes for the sake of improvement. Bungie has really reached that stage where they've perfected the season's narrative flow, and the job of the narrative team now is realistically all about ensuring that they keep the narrative content being added to the game as fresh as possible and at the same pace. At the end of last season, my critique was just make sure you leave enough stuff for new players to latch onto, and that was it. The new season even starts well on that front, and sort of reintroduces Eris for people who've never met her, and introduces all sorts of characters, and yeah, tells us about who they are, and whilst it is a nice refresher for a person who has played this for a long time, I did notice that it was also very much there for the sake of new players. It spells out directly who the villain is going to be, it tells us about our allies, and for those of us who have stayed around longer, yeah, the story elements we know are very much there. And there are new story elements that nobody knows about, which are also very much impactful. All of this addresses some of that. There are major improvements that still need to be made when it comes to new player experiences, but as far as the seasonal narrative is concerned, I don't know what else I can really add, which means that this series of videos that I do where I critique the narrative, for the most part I think I'm going to kind of retire. I will still go ahead and offer critique where it's needed. It's not to say that the game is perfect, it's not to say that there aren't moments where it's going to be important to have a critique of the narrative, and it's going to still be important to provide feedback and to review things as things go forward, but I'm no longer in that place where I want to provide a continuous loop of feedback to the developers because I don't think they need it. They have their feet. They probably did before I even started doing this because video game development takes lag time and you can't immediately change something in-game in the space of a day. So yeah, I don't know how much more my critique is really going to help. At this moment in time, I'm very happy for everyone else to leave theirs in the comments section, but again, I think that the story and the narrative are just in a really good place, and the narrative team has earned my trust on that front with a proven track record. They earned it because, well, they showed me that they could earn it. It was this moment back in Beyond Light where they went ahead and they basically told us to trust them, and they delivered on that. They've done good story content across expansions and seasons, and they've got great story moments mixed in with everything. Fantastic lore has been delivered to us. We have awesome stuff going on in the story, both in the foreground and the background. It's just good. The game does not need a huge amount of critiquing at current, and so I'm going to be leaving it with that. However, I will go ahead and still offer my first impressions of the new season. So yeah, let's jump in and do that. As a quick note, by the way, this is all first impressions from the first 24 hours of the Season of the Haunted, and if you are looking to remain unspoiled, that's the reason why some of the gameplay thus far has been random EDZ footage. So yeah, if you want to remain unspoiled, click off now, but for those of you who do want to hear my first impressions, let's go ahead and transition over to some slightly more horrifying vistas. There we go. Okay, so on day 1 we were able to experience the opening mission and cutscenes of the season, the Castellum including its public event space and patrol spaces, which of course included also the pleasure gardens, the various catacombs within the underbelly, different parts of the Leviathan, and also the royal baths. There's a lot that came with that, but also we had the Sever mission. Sever, of course, is the new narrative content for the season, and I think all of this is pretty fantastic. This was a large amount of narrative content for day one, as we've come to expect from these seasons, and I think it gives us a decent look at the way that the season is going to pan out. The theme of the season pulls back to the narrative beats of Shadowkeep, Presage, and the Season of Opulence, with a fair smattering of supernatural communion and witchcraft horror elements layered in there to tie it all together, and it feels really quite cohesive. This season is looking good, particularly because of how it's leveraged the nightmares as a narrative device. The nightmares were an element of Shadowkeep that in my mind were pretty underused, and they could potentially have leveraged much more of strong narrative twists where necessary. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about them. Back in Shadowkeep, you had the nightmares rising from the Lunar Pyramid and taking on the form of old foes in the form of Guardian's trauma. Here's the thing, they were effectively used in Shadowkeep, but only in one instance, and that was with Eris's fire team haunting her, which was pretty spooky and really good, honestly. It told a great degree of stuff to us about the trauma that Eris had experienced and about trauma generally and accepting loss and about closure, and it was a really strong story beat when it was used. But for the most part, I think it was just one of these moments where nightmares in Shadowkeep felt very underused and poorly used as far as a narrative perspective is concerned. And the reason I say that is because nightmares in Shadowkeep were predominantly bosses that had a nostalgic twist. You would fight the Nightmare of Crota, or the Nightmare of the Fanatic, or the Nightmare of Gaul, and these would just be bosses that didn't really have any relation to the Hive or the Moon necessarily, but would have, this thing of, they were a big boss in our Guardian's past. Rarely was there a boss like, say, Crota or Omnigul that was exactly on point for all of the stuff that we were fighting them for. It was maybe 3 of those bosses, I'd throw Fogoth in there too, that made a lot of sense. And, it didn't narratively feel like it fitted all the time. And maybe that's okay, because, maybe it is just activities and bosses, but I still feel like there was more that could have been done. Here in Season of the Haunted, however, the nightmares have returned, and this time they're doing Calus's bidding, and they are directly malevolent. You see, the beginning of the Season of the Haunted explains that the nightmares of the Lunar Pyramid were released in Shadowkeep as a sort of defense mechanism, because people, including Eris, were starting to tamper with the pyramid. Here in the Season of the Haunted, they are a tool that's being actively used by Calus with malicious intent. Calus and the Leviathan communed with the pyramid on the moon, and at this moment in time has started drawing those nightmares to the Leviathan and is actively using them. This is very different from what we experienced in Shadowkeep. In Shadowkeep, this was dredged up trauma from Guardian's past, but now Calus is actively using them. Where before, it was kind of like exposing an old wound, now it's a little bit like taking that exposed wound, stabbing a knife back in, and twisting. Calus is very deliberately exploiting those nightmares to weaken us. That's an awesome choice, and I feel like we're going to see the way that it impacts the characters of this season going forward a lot. I also feel like we already see a fair amount of it thanks to the opening cutscenes and the Sever mission from the first week. And to talk briefly about the Sever mission from this first week, I think this is nightmares done correctly. You see, back in Shadowkeep again, you had these bosses that were just out there on the moon, and they didn't really have any context around why they were even there. It didn't make sense for the reason why they were about. Now we have nightmares that contextually make all the sense for the narrative. Crow, for example, is actively trying to excise and dispel the nightmare that haunts him personally, Uldren Sov. This is great, because Uldren Sov isn't just some nebulous blob of shadowy darkness. Instead, Uldren Sov is recognizable. You can see Uldren's face in there, you can hear Uldren's voice talking back and forth to Crow, and you can see Crow having to confront that fresh trauma again. Uldren actually goads him on. They have conversations back and forth that are really quite tangibly delicate, and you can feel that Crow is starting to fray whenever you do that Sever mission. It's a really strong set of writing that Bungie has introduced here. This also isn't just a moment where Bungie is driving home the fact that Crow and Uldren are separate characters using this nightmare device, but also it's showing how Crow can potentially doubt that idea. Crow sits there and at the very end of the mission, You know, when you go back to the helm and talk to him, he says that Aldrin and him are the exact same in some ways. And it's one of these moments where you sit and you have that character really struggling with their internal fears and regrets. It's amazing. It's really well done. They've leveraged it as a narrative device really well. But then you go into the Sever mission, you do the final boss, and you realize that they've even taken the old bosses aspect of it, and they've done it right here. You see, when Crow does try to dispel Aldrin, they have a conversation, and then Aldrin states that their legacy is coming to see them, or something along those lines, and you see the nightmare of the fanatic enter the arena, saying the word father. You then have to fight back the fanatic as Crow then fights to contain Aldrin. That right there is Nightmare bosses done correctly. The fanatic isn't just found somewhere on the moon for no good reason and then just fought and killed with certain mechanics. They aren't just sitting at the Shrine of Oryx because it was a play space that was available. No, you're fighting this alongside Crow, who is also having to deal with that very relevant trauma. Remember that that's relevant because Aldrin Sov basically created the Scorn, and the first Scorn that he created, thanks to wish magic from Riven, was, the Fanatic. All of this makes sense, it ties together with the characters, it is very relevant to Crow, and it's really impactful when you see all of that pulled together in Nightmare form. This is the most direct form of confronting trauma that one can perhaps have for Crow's character. Yeah, this is Nightmares done right. This is really good. It's very promising for what we'll see in the rest of the season, and it makes me really question what we're going to see with something like, say, Zavala and his wife in particular. I'd assumed, given the text that we had in the previous lore entries regarding her, that she died of old age. But maybe she was murdered by someone. Can you imagine for a second if she was murdered by, say, Tannix? That would be an incredible reason to bring Tannix back as a story boss for this particular Sever mission. But also, man, is that a great development of Tannix's character, and isn't that an amazing way for Zavala to get some personal development as well? All of this is good. This is gravy. Bungie can layer all of this on as stuff goes. I really look forward to seeing how they develop this in the season. That's really good. I think it's also worth giving a little praise note to the Castellan patrols. Hear me out on this one, okay? I know that sounds like a bit of an odd one to lean into after I've just talked about Sever and the narrative story missions, but hear me out. Some of them are setting Nightmares to rest, and Eris will give you a little context about each one when the time is right, and, that's fine. You're sitting there and you're getting a little bit more context about Nightmares from the moon and the things that killed them. You'll see a few of them repeat here and there, but that's not really what I'm talking about. Some of the patrols have you walking up to the frames that Calus has overridden, and then you'll actually get a patrol mission from Calus as well. He'll actually talk to you, he will give you a little context when you reach your patrol location, he gives you his opinion on the current events, he talks about other characters, and that's really important. This is good. This is Bungie doing what they did with Witch Queen, where it's acquainting you with the villain of the expansion and their motives. It allows you to get inside their head and to really understand them. And this is pretty good out of just a seasonal patrol beacon. I really do hope that Bungie remembers to insert Calus in the seasonal narrative in more ways than just this, though. It's good to see him and Eris making comments during the public event back and forth. I do love to see all of that, that's really good, but I hope to see more beyond just that. Put him in Sever, where we inevitably get to missions which involve Caiatl. Put him there, taunting her alongside her nightmares, which we know now at least includes Gaul, but I'm still holding out with the expectation that we might see Umuna Wrath. I really want to see if they include Calus more, and honestly, they should if they're doing everything correctly. This is the moment at which Bungie can prove that they're getting their villains right. They are understanding the key point that for villains to be effective they need screen time, which they absolutely did. They read the assignment and they understood it when it came to Witch Queen, and I'm hopeful that they will do the same when it comes to this season. Giving villains screen time makes them better villains. When we sat there and had to face up against someone like, say, Aramis, the lack of meaningful screen time with her meant that, she wasn't as effective as she could have been. Now we get Calus. We've already had a lot of history with Calus, but if Calus gives us a little bit more this season, that's going to be really good. We may get more out of him than we've gotten out of a lot of villains from mainline expansions, and that's awesome, because Calus can avoid that feeling of becoming the villain of the week. And if he does, that's really good. That'll be really exciting. I think the real dark horse of the season that everyone should keep in mind, even if it doesn't really change too much, however, is Eris. Eris has referred to herself in this season as a new witch, as she takes control of the Crown of Sorrow. This is a real escalating development of her character. Where before, when we first met her in the Dark Below back in Destiny 1, she was a rugged and haunted survivor, and she was someone who was trying to get revenge, she has now embraced her journey and her place in the universe. She knows who she is and who she was, and if I had to use a word to immediately describe her energy, it wouldn't be as haunted as it used to be. It'd be determined or even driven. She knows what has to be done. She knows how the path that they'll chart is probably one that goes through darkness, and she's not afraid of doing it. She is determined to ensure that even if they have to use dark means, they will achieve their ends. Keep an eye on her character and see how it develops. As a member of the Dark Vanguard, I would anticipate that her role in the core story is only going to get more and more important. And also, Bungie has been a big fan of doing awesome things with Eris for a long, long time. I once again have to sit there and say well done to all the voice cast as well. Everyone who's jumped in and contributed something to the season thus far, it's really easy to tell that some of the voice work has been absolutely fantastic, whether that's Brandon O'Neill as Crow, or whether that's Courtney Taylor as Caiatl and Amanda Holliday, whether that is someone like Morla Gorondona, who again reprises Eris, and I didn't know if you could add more to Eris, but she adds more to Eris. Eris just keeps getting better every season. Yeah, no, seriously. Amazing work from every single one of you. You've all done fantastic. And of course, I look forward to hearing more from Lance Reddick too as Zavala. Seriously, this is all going to be a fantastic season. The cream of the crop as far as voice actors is concerned, they're all here, basically, and that makes me even more excited. This week ended with Eris needing to come up with further plans of action, and as per usual, we have the break until reset next week. Crow failed in his first attempt at severing his nightmare, but that doesn't mean that has to remain this way. This season is once again going to be talking about regret, loss, pain, and closure, and paradoxically, I feel like the narrative here is in an awesome place despite the grim subject that it's describing. It's been very well written from what I can see thus far, and I just can't wait to jump into the lore. Speaking of which, lore videos coming very soon. I know that there is a certain legendary glaive that is bound to have everybody raising their eyes, and you know what? Yeah, I'm covering that one first, and then I'm going to jump into the seasonal story from this week, and we're going to talk about everything that happened, because oh my god, yeah, if you've not played it and done all of the conversations and done the radio conversation back in the Helm, emotional damage incoming. Seriously, wow, emotional damage. Yeah, I'm gonna leave you to do that if you've not played it yet. Go play it. The season's great for the story. Go and enjoy it. Either way, thank you very much for watching. Leave your own thoughts down below. If you think that there's a need for the critique videos, like I talked about at the beginning, let me know, because yeah, I'll still make them if you guys think that it's actually a valuable service. But if not, I'm happy to just do first impression stuff, and then to do recaps of the narrative at the end of the season, and then just do normal lore content as is. All things considered though, thank you so much for watching, and I do hope that you've all enjoyed. In the meantime, my name is Bife. Per audacia ad astra. I'll see you, Starside.